Get away, TJ.
Dan the man. Thank you, sir. And happy Friday to everybody. It's a wonderful day full of challenges / opportunities for entrepreneurial community. With us today, well, you got my intro, by the way. I'm the fund manager for ABQID Fund, which is managed by C&M Annuity, which is doing an incredible amount of things to grow talent, skills, entrepreneurship, the tech community in New Mexico, especially central New Mexico, but all New Mexico. Love the work that we're doing, and thanks, Dan, for doing the Activate New Mexico program that I mentor for. With us today is someone I call a friend that I met back in 2017 when he mentored for a health and wellness cohort we ran at ABQID. And I distinctly remember him speaking to our portfolio companies and some of the companies in that cohort. And he shared an incredible story that resonated, and I've referenced many times with entrepreneurs since then. And since then, he's on to a third company now and has even more war stories to tell us. But Mark Harris is a serial entrepreneur, currently based in Nashville, spent some time in New Mexico, so knows us, believes in us, etc. And this topic is near and dear to his heart. He's very passionate about it, maybe more passionate than even I am, which is saying a lot because you know me. People who've gotten mentorship from me know my fixation on customers. So Mark, thanks so much for joining us this morning. It's great to have you.
Thanks for having me, TJ. Looking forward to it.
Tell us who Mark Harris is a little bit. I know we've got the serial entrepreneur thing down, but tell us about the human side. Where did you grow up? What's the family situation? All that good stuff.
Yeah. So I grew up on the East Coast, New York, Pennsylvania. I spent my high school years over in London, England. And then came down to Nashville, Tennessee for school, and I spent a long time in college. did undergrad. I was really a sort of a scientist at heart. Went straight from undergrad through a PhD program in molecular biology, but realized about halfway through that program, I really wanted to have a bigger impact in the world more quickly than I could from the science side. So ended up applying to and getting into a joint PhD MBA program. So I finished up my research and jumped over to the business side, and then worked a little bit in the genetic testing industry, and then got started on this entrepreneurial track, and have never looked back. Married, 2 kiddos, and home base right now is Nashville after about 3 years out in Albuquerque. And I'll tell you, I miss the mountains right out the back door. It's pretty awesome.
Yes, I don't miss the mountains. They're right here next to me. I live in. Don't rub it in. I will, but that's fine. No, it's great. And we were just talking beforehand. I want to visit Nashville, have some friends there, some human-centered design creatives, and our former program manager at ABQID, Haynes Motzinger, actually is at Nashville in a kind of entrepreneurial support organization called the Wondery, which I thought was a really cool name. So Mark, the topic for today is customer discovery. I've come to find that for entrepreneurs, it's a loaded term. It's been bandied about. It's been used exhaustively. Like, have you done your customer discovery yet? Oh yeah, check that box. Stuff like that. But so just definition of terms to start things off with. What is customer discovery to you as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of different definitions out there, and we could talk, and probably will talk for quite a while about this today. For me, it's you're coming in, and the first thing is you have something that you think is valuable to someone. You wouldn't be starting a business if that wasn't the case. And a lot of the times I find people start a business because they have had that problem themselves. They found a clear solution on how to solve it, and they go after it, right? And so one of those key early assumptions is that person that they were is the key customer, the key client, etc. So I have that. I'm trying to sell them something that's valuable. But I think a key to true customer discovery is figuring out who it's most valuable to, because it's not always the first person that you assume it's valuable to. And so the sort of filter I like to put on customer discovery is ultimately, who's willing to pay for this? And how much are they willing to pay for it? And if there's multiple clients or customers you might be going after, who's willing to pay the most for it? And the reason I put it through that filter is it is a proxy for a pain point that you are solving for them. And so your goal, I think, as a business early on should be to solve the most pressing pain points for your customers as possible. And that, to me, is what customer discovery is all about.
By the way, everybody, we're going to ask you that question for the breakout sessions to express to your breakout groups of, I think we'll do 3 today, for the business idea or the current business you're working on. You know, who's your customer? What is the problem you're solving? And who's are they going to pay for it? And if so, how much are they going to pay for it? So just a little seed planting going on there. What do you find, Mark? And we'll get to some specific stories too, but before we dive into that, what, having mentored for entities like ABQID in the past and been in this community for some time, what do you see are the biggest misconceptions? What are the patterns you see for the misconception around customer discovery?
Yeah, so there's a few of these. The first, I think, is assuming because it was a big problem for you, it's a big problem for everyone. So I think a key part of the customer discovery process should not just be, hey, look at this new widget. This is solving a problem for you, right? Asking sort of leading questions around that, getting validation that, yeah, that's kind of an issue. Yeah, that would be useful. Like, to me, that's what most people do for customer discovery. And I don't think that's nearly deep enough. What I think you really need to get at is trying to understand what all the problems are, at least at a high level for your given customer. Now, I have mainly done B2B businesses. And so one of the filters I put on it is this a C-suite problem? Meaning, is a chief operating officer or the CEO, like, what do they care about? Because ultimately, those guys, they've got 8 to 10 things on their problem list they're trying to solve at any given time. If you're not on that 8 to 10 problem set list, forget about it. They don't care. Now, maybe somebody lower down their organization cares, but the C-suite doesn't. And so what is on their list? Are you on their list? And would you be a solution they'd consider? So that's one of those sort of misconceptions and potentially a way to get over it.
That's an interesting, I'll go back to the first part there is like, it's an interesting catch-22 because I love, as a fund manager, I love the founders who are steeped in the market, who have that market experience. I was a therapist for 20 years. I was, my wife, I'm thinking of one of our startups. My wife has been doing home visiting for this many years. So I've seen her grapple with this problem of scheduling and logistics and stuff like that. But that creates a cognitive dissonance based on what you're saying, that it's good to have real firsthand knowledge of the problem, but it's bad in the assumption that builds that everybody, everybody also struggles with the same thing, who's doing the same thing, and B, that the business decision maker above that person sees it as a problem that you see it as a user. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. There's, and you're getting at a really key point, which is, so let me give an example. A friend of mine who started a business here in Nashville, and I'm like totally embarrassed because I'm blanking on the name of her company, but she had this fascinating story, right? So she was a high school cheerleader, was doing some crazy flips, wiped out, and severed her vertebrae, and she became quadriplegic. She was lucky enough to have a team around her. She was 17 when this happened, lucky enough to have sort of this team around her that found her some of this sort of new equipment that was coming out. If you fast forward to today, she is a walking quadriplegic. It is amazing. It has changed her life. And she became this sort of spokesperson for people with spinal cord injuries. And she found you have this whole community of spinal cord injury people who want to get better, obviously. And you have this newfangled equipment that they can't get access to, but those guys want to sell this equipment. So she started piecing these two together. Let's create a marketplace and help line up these two groups. So the customer discovery there, of course, spinal cord injury people are going to want that solution. Of course, manufacturers are going to want to sell more. The challenge becomes, is that an efficient business strategy, go-to-market strategy to bring those two pieces together? What are the pain points you're solving? What are the distribution challenges, et cetera? If you fast forward about 3 or 4 years into her journey at that company, what she eventually found was the true customer was the health plan. They had the biggest economic pain point because people that have spinal cord injuries are extremely expensive for a health plan. If they can get those people healthy, you're driving down tremendous amount of cost. So she found that by producing spinal cord injury management plans, that a health plan would be willing to pay for it and they would drive distribution. So she could solve the early problem of linking together the manufacturers and the equipment and the rehab centers and the patients, but her customer was completely different than the customer she originally thought she had.
And so and what I hear from this story is what's something I really believe, which is customer discovery is the journey of the startup, its first years. It's not a part of the journey. It's not a step in the journey. You don't launch once you have done customer discovery. Launching and doing your MVP and getting out there lets you discover your customers better and better and better. And it took her, sounds like 3 to 4 years to find the customer.
Right. And
That's,
could that have potentially
that's
been
a sobering thought for
more
many of us.
efficiently? Like, that's an open question. But she had a problem. It's just, how do you drive a profitable business that can grow effectively and solve that original problem you're going after?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I've seen lots of our companies start a company, start driving revenue, and not even know that a certain customer type exists, but through the act of engaging and following the early customers they thought were their customers, that's when you learn broader how the market works. And healthcare especially seems prone to this mystery, this black box mystery of where things go and how things are bought, and the mathematics don't seem to work out. Education, some of these entrenched industries, which are so ripe for disruption, you start to see why they have not been disrupted because of how inscrutable the market seems to be sometimes. I wonder, so your previous startup before HeroWear, and I'd love for you to talk about all your specific startups as you tell stories, but your previous startup was Concert Genetics. I'd love for you to, I think it's appropriate to segue to the sticky note story, the story I love so darn much because of how it embodies this process, even though there's some pain for you in it, because you came on a realization that you could have saved about, I don't know how much time, but go tell this story about Concert Genetics a little bit, this company does, and kind of what you discovered along the way.
Yeah, and I'll even take a step further back and tell you a quick story that'll lead into this, because I think it'll also teach you a little bit about customer discovery and what you can miss if not done or not done appropriately, et cetera. So actually, my first business, I started when I was in grad school nights and weekends. It was a triathlon training DVD production company. And I basically skipped the whole customer discovery process because I was an endurance athlete. All my buddies were endurance athletes and coaches. And so I knew what they wanted. We're going to produce a great new set of triathlon training DVDs and workout plans, et cetera. We're good to go. And I just sort of plowed forward. Now, I assumed that the athletes were ultimately my customers. And if I'd gone out and talked to a bunch of athletes, they may or may not have told me they wanted it and were willing to buy it. What I missed was I was truly where I should have been selling to was distributors. I should have been talking to athletic stores, shoe stores, whoever. Those are the people I really needed to sell to reach widespread distribution. The websites that sold these other similar products and such. That was my biggest learning from my first business is I really goofed up the distribution channels with that business. So then fast forward to Concert. So formed Concert, and the key issue I saw here, so I was working in the genetic testing industry, saw a huge wave of new tests that were going to be hitting the industry, also saw huge price differentials for basically the same product, and wanted to create a marketplace. We're going to link together doctors and genetic test labs and help those doctors quickly and easily find the tests they want at the right price point. And so I was like, I'm going to do customer discovery really well this time. And so I went out and literally talked to 2,000 physicians. This is going to conferences and cold calls and everything else, surveys. And they all said they want it and they're going to use it, etc. So I launched the thing and no orders and almost no web traffic. And it's just like crickets out there. And I'm trying to figure out why the heck this is happening. This is like months are going by. My whole financial model is just blowing up. And so I end up going into this doctor's office. He's one of the guys that helped me develop the damn thing. And he's not using it. So I go into his office and I said, I'm going to sit down with you with a patient you're going to order a test with. I'm going to watch you from start to end of the process. And so we sit there and he goes through his exam, yada, yada, yada. And he goes order the test and he like writes the test name on a Post-it note and he hands it to the nurse. And he turns to me and he's like, I just ordered the test. And that was the light bulb moment in my head. I said, no, you didn't. And so I ran down the hallway and basically followed the Post-it note through the hospital. And I found this whole world I didn't know existed, which was the nurse takes that and enters it into a system and it goes down to the lab and then it passes on to this other guy. And there's this whole system. So we ended up actually building a whole workflow tool for hospitals, recognizing that it was all that staff that truly had the problem. It wasn't the physician. And so that was an interesting kind of pivot on customer discovery that just was following and forcing somebody to actually go through the actions and watching them.
I find that story fascinating every time I hear it because it's not just listening, asking good questions. It's actually this really, I'm a lover of human-centered design, which is a very profoundly simple idea that you have to really empathize with humans, and that requires things like what you did, which is just sitting and being with them and seeing their lives unfold. Because if you were on calls, which you were, you mentioned 2,000 surveys, etc. Yes, I have this problem. Great, checkbox, launch company. And yes, I order tests because in the doctor's mind, that's that they didn't have to follow the sticky note. They were concerned about their patients. So it's just a more sophisticated approach to customer discovery is often needed to expose the areas that you don't even know you need to ask about. There's unknown unknowns, right? So yeah, it's fascinating.
I'll mention one other thing with that one too that I think is super important, and that's people are nice. They want to please you. That nobody wants to be the guy that says your idea is crap and get out of here. They're trying to be nice. Oh yeah, I'd probably use that. That sounds great, but unfortunately they're lying to you. And so recognize that you're going to have to challenge all those assumptions. And to your point, TJ, kind of find another way to get at the heart of it and prove, are they really going to take action or not?
Yeah. And that's where that customer discovery meets launching something and putting it in the cold, dark hands of the internet from an e-commerce or whatever it is, and removing yourself and that, especially American, but I think just overall human dynamic of being nice and wanting to support an entrepreneur, especially local entrepreneurs, etc. and seeing if they plunk down money, you know, real money, because that's when the testing returns real learning. And that's what you discovered. It's like that oh crap moment where it's your financial model's being busted up. You're like thinking, what am I doing here? I'm miserable failure. I don't know if that was going through your mind, but that's what prompted that true customer discovery discipline that led to the insight you needed. And it seems like you have enough grit and determination to get through those really dark days. But how much more so have you benefited from that in your subsequent endeavors, from, you know, peeling back those onions quicker in the process, and really being adamant about understanding everything about the market and the customer journey that you possibly can. So Concert Genetics, fast forward a little bit, you developed the workflow, that company has traction. Tell us for how you got from there to like kind of HeroWear, and how customer discovery has played a role with this new endeavor.
Yeah. So there's a couple other quick customer discovery pieces too on Concert, and then that influence is really what I was looking for in HeroWear. So at Concert, we got the hospital tools out there. We started to sell some. We got some decent recurring revenue off that, but we still weren't selling really quickly into hospitals. So I kept kind of pushing on this and questioning where's the real value and how do we, and I ended up finding actually our true customers for Concert were health plans, very much like my friend in the spinal cord injury space. And so we ended up actually building a whole set of solutions and services to basically process genetic testing claims data and service back analytics solutions that could drastically drive down costs. And you're talking, for large health plans, you're talking hundreds of millions of dollars a year in just complete inefficiency once we had those tools built out. And it took us several years to build those tools out. Now, a key issue arose early on, and here's another challenge with these assumptions too, because you can have great data and you don't know what you don't know. And that was, we'd started to get genetic testing claims data sets from some of these health plans. And the first two groups we got genetic testing data sets from, we saw that genetic testing was growing at 70% a year. Now, with that growth rate, that does mean it's a C-suite problem, even if it's a relatively small area of spend, because those health plans were terrified that that's going to continue to grow. So they're going to try to find a way to squash that growth rate. What I didn't know for another couple years until I got enough data is those two health plans were in the 99th percentile in terms of growth rates for genetic testing. And that's why they were talking to me so early on, because they were the ones with the biggest problem, and the rest of the market was much, much lower growth rate. So again, all my models I built on the data sets I had, which were very skewed. So that's something that I've taken, a big learning I've taken, which is, again, you can't fully trust if you have a subset of the data, like can you find a way to get a more representative sampling before you kind of double down on one particular solution?
And I'm gonna ask one more follow-up on that. Like, how did you land those first two health plans? Was there some geographic bias because they were near? That's something I've been talking with some New Mexico entrepreneurs about, is that New Mexico probably isn't, but just statistically, or might not be the best place to find your first customer sometimes. But was it just luck that you happened to find them?
It was such a big issue. One of this, our first, the first big health plan we landed was the biggest one. It was United. So we caught the big fish first. And what had happened there was their head of genetics had actually published like an open letter, basically saying genetic testing coding is messed up, and if industry doesn't solve it, we're going to find a way to solve it internally. And that was another epiphany for me, like, holy crap, we have the data. I think we could solve that problem. We didn't have the tools to do it, but I hypothesized that we could get there. And so it took 9 months for me to get a meeting with him, but I just kept hammering every connection I could possibly get to, emails, calls, etc. Eventually I had a meeting scheduled. I had a half an hour with him, I went in there. We ended up spending an hour and a half together and came out with, a handshake that we were doing a pilot. So I pitched him the capabilities that I thought we could have. I didn't have any of that. It did not exist, and I wasn't lying. I was clear that we were developing this and we would work with them, but it was an aspirational pitch that hit, and they were willing to invest in us and take a bit of a risk with us to get up and going. And then from there, it was just pushing on a lot of other groups to get the next couple.
So I just want to put a pin in this because this is important in terms of determination and just not blind, but that entrepreneurial stick-to-itness. 9 months after United Healthcare, they put out the "we need this" appeal. So early adopters know they have a problem, actively seeking a solution. Still took you 9 months to get to the right person. And so don't quit. Never, 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 never give up.
That's right.
Good lesson learned. Let's close the meeting. Have a good day, everybody. No. Well, good. So, okay. Last but not least, and then we'll get to some breakout rooms. Get to HeroWear.
Yeah. So jump to HeroWear. So the last and the last piece there that I still learned was one of the issues as we started to grow within health plans was we still were not at the C-suite, and that hit home to me. I had a meeting. It was a group, but Humana CEO was up there. It was like 20 of us in the room, and we were asking questions. And I asked him how big of an issue if genetic testing was on his top 10 list or not. And he looked over at his COO and said, hey, is it, Bobby? And Bobby went through and, oh yeah, it is because this and that. But that to me was an aha, because the CEO didn't know. He had to ask this guy. So that meant it sure as hell wasn't on his top 10 list. And so that to me was why it was going to take us a long time to build the relationships and continue to grow revenue in Concert. And Concert's been growing great, but it's a slow, steady growth because selling into health plans is just painful. So anyway, fast forward. So I stepped down from there looking for my next opportunity. And so my criteria was I want to do something new and innovative, but I absolutely want to make sure it has slam dunk, solves the C-suite problem from the beginning. Because if it doesn't, it's just going to take a long time. And I wanted something that would grow really, really fast. And so what HeroWear basically does, it's a lift assist device, 3-pound exoskeleton, but it's used for logistics workers, but it offloads about 30% of your low back muscles. So the pitch there is, okay, it's going to reduce injuries. It's going to improve employee retention. They're going to be less tired when they go home, etc. So you could start that, and many people probably would. I talking to a whole bunch of logistics workers, and it's important. You're going to have to do that. But to me, from a business perspective, what was much more interesting was, can I get in front of CEOs, COOs who are running logistics companies? And when I started to do that really early on in my diligence, what blew me away was I showed it to them, they leaned in, they got interested, and as I asked questions about injury rates, employee retention issues, etc., they were rattling off absolutely exact numbers off the top of their heads.
Didn't have to turn this way or that way to get those numbers. They knew them. Yeah.
And so they knew it. And so that was the moment when I knew that was enough for me to commit to that company being my next startup. Because if those guys had that big of a problem, we were going to be able to sell sort of C-suite down into these big organizations.
Yeah, I love the kind of from the ground up customer discovery that has to meet the determination to get to the mind of the C-suite and not take any no for an answer until you get a direct answer from them as well. It's kind of, you have to go to the top and you have to understand the ground game as well. Which you kind of hear this in entrepreneurship, and if you're doing customer discovery right, you kind of hear this refrain that you need to know your customer better than the customer knows themselves sometimes. And that comes with that full understanding of the logistics worker and some of their plights, but the numbers and the balance sheets and the cash flow statements and the problems therein that the CEO based on his or her role must be on top of. So so what's the exact status of HeroWear? And then I'm gonna hand it back to you, Dan, to describe breakout.
Yeah, so I jumped in there about a year ago as really the first business guy. My co-founders were the inventors of the technology they developed over at Vandy. So fast forward over the last year, just in March, we launched the commercial version of the device and we started selling. Literally today is our first day of shipping product. But as soon as we launched, we started obtaining pre-orders. So we've been selling out 60 days in advance of inventory. So we're ramping up manufacturing. I currently have 50 deals in the pipeline that I'm working with organizations, most of which are Fortune 50, Fortune 100 companies. It's going great and just building out the team right now and trying to execute.
I can't help but think that coronavirus has been a significant boon to this as well, right?
It's been pluses and minuses. The hard part is just people have an aha moment when they put it on and they feel it, and we can't go and visit their facilities right now. So we're having to do all online-based training. And honestly, a lot of people are just distracted with coronavirus. So a lot of the times a key influencer for us is the health and safety people, and they're swamped. So if anything, it's probably slowed us down a bit. Yeah, their volume's up, that's for sure. And yeah, they're having trouble recruiting people, but I think
it's put the problem in stark relief, but it's also just slowed down the sales cycle just logistically, because it is an experiential kind of product. Well, fantastic. I have a multitude of questions. I'm sure our entrepreneurs on the call have some questions, but before we get to those, we're going to do something that's become the most popular thing about our Stay Engaged series is these breakout rooms where you get to meet a couple other entrepreneurs. So, and we have a guiding question for you on the theme of customer discovery. And I want to ask everybody, I'll be just roving around and popping in and out just to kind of observe, and I won't be speaking, but I want you to ruminate on Mark's lessons learned and reflect on what you believe is your answer to the question, who's your customer? What problem do they have? How are you solving it for them? And are they willing to pay for it? If so, how much? You know, and really understand, really think deeply about that word customer. Who is the customer? So anyway, Dan, go ahead and explain to everybody how we're going to do this, especially for those that I haven't seen before who might not be familiar with the Zoom breakout rooms.
Thanks, TJ. Thanks, Mark. So if you're not familiar with the breakout rooms, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to go out into separate conversation rooms, about 3 people each. The question is in the group chat, so take a look at that, the focus question. And then if you have extra time, there is kind of a bonus extra time type question. So usually you don't, because we'll only have about 12-ish, 13-ish minutes. And then once we come back from the breakout rooms, we'll do the Q&A with Mark for the remaining time. So really encourage y'all to turn on your cameras and really socialize and try to network. You know, we can't do that as much nowadays in person, and so we're really trying to make that a big feature for this. Again, TJ is going to be popping in and out of those rooms. However, if you have any issues at all, feel free to just click on the leave room and you'll come back to this main thread, okay? And obviously when the time is up, I will obviously bring you all back. TJ?
Yeah, just be mindful of time. So groups of 3 means you'll have about, restrict yourself. If you need your iPhone or phone timer out to give yourself 4 minutes, please do that. Just be respectful of everybody's time. You want to hear from the other 2 and they want to hear from the other 2. So just self-police on the timing. And Dan will prompt also when it's time to kind of make sure the next person is sharing. So yeah, let's do it.
Okay.
Oh,
great.
one more thing, Dan. If you don't have a startup, don't feel like you can't participate. Maybe you've building an idea, etc. Maybe it's something you're not even active on whatsoever. Use this as an exercise to help you be thinking in a sophisticated way about who your customer might be for that thing you might do. So, and if you're a part of an organization, use your organization as the startup, as the company. This is a discipline that pertains to basically anyone. It's applicable to one's personal life as well. So you don't have to be a founder of a startup to participate. That's all.
Great. And just one more note, it's going to go real fast. So again, try to not be super windy on your kind of hellos and that sort of stuff, and just try to get back to the focus question. TJ, you're going to start off in the room with Mark Harris, and when you're done with that room, just come back and I'll throw you in another one.
Thanks.
All right. Have a great breakout. Harold, per your request, I did not add you to a breakout room. You're muted, buddy. Let me unmute you real quick. Let me, all right, you can unmute yourself.
You want me to, what I could do is mess around with you and do this.
Talking like you didn't have your teeth in or something there, old man.
Yeah, no, you know, no, you know what? My hair is so messed up. No, I just, you know what? I've got two different. I'm supposed to be at two different board meetings later today, and probably won't really free up until 1:30. So I'm planning to be there for the afternoon session, but I didn't want to get involved in something now and have to cut away.
Sure, understood. Yeah, how do you think it's gone so far?
You mean
recording?
Welcome back from breakouts, everybody. I got to dip into 3 different rooms. Dan, how many rooms did we have, Dan? Did I get all of them, or?
We had about 5. You didn't get to go to the one. I apologize. I always hate when people drop off after I assign them to a room. So I apologize for the last group that had 2 people in it. So you didn't get to that one.
All right. It's all good. I just want to share some observations, and a lot of the observations from what I heard people talking about when it got to be their turn and they were describing their customer is that I actually heard a lot of discussion of users versus customers. And that belies that, I think 2 things, belies the stage those companies might be in. Like, here's the people I think would use this, but you haven't gotten yet to that level of sophisticated customer discovery to how you make money in this business. It'd be like, Mark, you go starting HeroWear and focusing all your attention on logistics workers, all your attention on not filling out the whole view of the company with what's in it for UPS or FedEx or what have you. And as the CEO, that's the role of the CEO, is to look at the whole picture. So I really encourage those who don't yet have the full picture. They're really understanding users really well, you know, ages 16 to 23, whatever, they're into this and that, or, you know, these types of customers will end up buying in this 2-sided marketplace. That other side's got to be filled out, and not just to check some boxes, but to find out, hey, do I have a business here? Will people spend money on this? Or is there after all no value or no way to get to it quickly? And that was another thing you brought up, Mark, is that if you discover your sales cycle is really long, you might have a business, but it might just not be the business you want to get involved in. And that's a good discovery too. And that is something that's really tough for many entrepreneurs once they're a year in, 2 years in, to be able to look at the numbers and say, you know what, I don't think this is a healthy business opportunity. Maybe I'll come back to it when regulations change or market adopts it more readily, but I'm going to pivot, which is interesting. But let's see, what else I heard somebody say they're not seeing the value anymore. And that's, this person was talking about clients they serve in their organization, which is fantastic. But this is why it's so critical to continue customer discovery before, during, after, and in all and through all. Your customers are your ultimate source of truth, not not until you launch and then you've got it, but always, because that priority might change. Global pandemic might come and totally disrupt things, and you know, in the case of HeroWear, slow things down or whatever. And you know, so long as you can look at the calculus, redo your financials, and say, no, this is still worthwhile and feasible, so be it. But if you discover kind of your main value proposition is changing, that's good data to have, because then you can focus your attention maybe on another problem that is displacing it, and you can be there to see the business that displaces your business and grab it, rather than some other competitor coming in and blockbustering you, right? Anywho, that really good conversation. I hope you met some cool people. One thing Dan and I like to ask is, if there's some cool people you feel like, hey, I need to spend more time with that person, make sure you go to the chat here and find them under the drop down, send to, you know, Rick or Carter, and say, hey, Cell is this, or my email is this. Let's Zoom again sometime, because Zoom is the bee's knees. Although here in Albuquerque, we can start to let's patio chat at O'Neill's or a Starbucks or Flying Star or something. Cool. Mark, any observations from you, sir, before we kind of get to Q&A?
You just made me start wishing I had access to Flying Star again. Man, just twisting the knife.
I told you I'd rub it in.
No, I mean, I think those were all really good points. And I think you're spot on with that whole, initially, usually the focus is on the user, and then kind of coming back and figuring out the true buyer later. And all I wanted to kind of put an exclamation point on that was to think about, just don't overbuild. If you've only done the user side of it, it's still super important. You have to do it. You don't have a business without that part, but just don't overbuild with the assumption that the buyer will feel the same way until you test it.
That's good. Lots more to say, but I want to hear some other voices here. So, like Dan just prompted in the chat box here, type in your questions, especially for Mark.
Mark, there was a couple of questions early on that I'm just going to bring back up that you might have touched base on, but it might be a good kickoff point while people type in their questions. There was one about, you know, how did you build anything before you actually sold the product in one of your ventures? And then kind of an add-on after that, once you started getting leads, you know, how many of those 50 leads that you currently said you have are, you know, hot leads or qualified leads?
Yeah. So the first question, so I mean, with Triathlon DVD, I basically plunked down all the money, did DVD production, got out DVDs and everything before we even tried to sell it. I was able to eventually recoup those investment dollars, and then I kind of shut down the business after that because it was not going to scale as much as I had hoped. With Concert, definitely we did a lot of build out before we launched. You know, I'd spent there was a lot of, I think it was a 12 to 18 months really to get my seed round of funding. A lot of that was customer discovery, but again, it was somewhat misfocused customer discovery, business planning, financial modeling, etc., and then building out some prototypes to get out there. But almost every step along the way, just I think because the business model we had at Concert required significant upfront IT investment before we got paid. And that has challenges. With HeroWear, it was a little different because we'd already had 3 to 4 years of R&D done at Vandy. So we had a prototype that we knew had a biomechanical advantage and it worked and you could put it on people and get feedback from. And when I came in as well, we were able to get 2 governmental grants, so SBIR grants, that basically funded us for the first 6 months to get to a point where we really could go deep on customer discovery before we started spending significant dollars on commercialization of the tech. So I had really high confidence this thing was going to sell before we took money from investors. So that was a bit different with the new business. There was a second question there. Oh, the leads versus.
the qualified leads out of the 50? Like, how do you distinguish,
Those are all qualified. Yeah. That's so the way, for that particular business, the way I qualify, and I think a key part of this is the question of like, you want to figure out what the sales journey is, and like optimize what your sales cycle is and what steps are in your cycle, and be really regimented about basically how you move people through that funnel. So I've got my own kind of systematic process for that. But basically, when people reach out to us, if they're from, our target market, which really is a B2B customer that has over 20 units they would need, and I am talking to a champion who has requested a quote, they go into the first stage of the sales funnel. And then as we talk through pricing and I meet the actual decision maker, they request a quote, they sign a quote, they actually pay us. It kind of moves through that cycle.
Yeah, 50 is a good amount there. A chap asked a follow-up question here about grants. How did you approach grants, and how did you decide on going after one? And there's an array of options, SBIR, etc.
Yeah, I mean, the quick answer there is my founders both came out of the academic world. So really, I just kind of followed in their footsteps. They kind of knew what they were doing with the grant applications. I helped with SBIR. That was helpful because it's sort of joint. What are their specific research aims? But there's also this whole section on really how are you going to build a business that I could help them put together. But most of the drafting of that was done really before I came on board. And it's still a pretty long process. What I will tell you is, depending on what type of company you have, what your business looks like, those grants can be pretty helpful. There's STTR, there's SBIR. There's also some interesting military grants as well. We were able to get another grant through the Air Force, specifically for development of technology that could be used by the military. So AFWorks has something. There's also SoftWorks, which is a special forces sort of a startup kind of fund granting. It's a grant to like figure out how to sell to the military. So they pay you to figure out how they can buy stuff for you, from you. It's kind of weird. But I'd recommend going after those as long as it doesn't distract you from your core business. Just be really careful that it isn't taking you in like a totally different direction than you would go otherwise.
Yeah.
I got a couple private messages that dovetail off the military component, and these are a little bit more fun. And of course, we're not expecting you to disclose all your leads and all that sort of stuff. But so I think some people, when they heard exoskeletons, they thought about like superhumans and all that sort of stuff, kind of military, what's that Netflix called? Black Mirror it's called, right?
There's several
there's several of those. Yeah. Just kind of curious about, maybe in generalizations, kind of what areas you see your customers are coming from. Are they defense? Are they big manufacturer, distributor types of people? Is there kind of a different user personas that you have? And is it going down the route of that you're going to build superhumans and mech warriors down the road?
So what we have found is basically we're trying to build a brand that improves health, safety, productivity for anyone in a physically demanding job. And there are many physically demanding jobs. And so we've broken them down into verticals. And one thing I've been really careful on from the beginning is we don't want to get distracted by trying to go after too many verticals. So we've initially honed in on logistics initially. Military has been another application. It probably requires some tweaking of the design and the technology, has to integrate into flat jackets, etc. But construction is another one. Utilities, healthcare has been pretty huge. Nurses have actually the highest rate of back injury of any profession. So we see those, and then we break it down and we say, okay, what could we go after with our existing core technology so we don't have to overinvest in R&D? But what do we sort of put a pin in for 2022 or 2023 as product extensions? So our product extensions will be healthcare arm, a military arm, And utilities is probably a little different too, just because they have to be flame retardant and no metal pieces, etc. And so if we can have a situation, this is another good use of grant funding, like with the military, if they're going to pay us to do the R&D in an adjacent area, and so I can hire somebody to do that, and it doesn't distract the rest of the team, then I'll do that all day long. It's like, joke with my team, it's our federally funded R&D department. So, we'll do that, but otherwise we'll stay really focused on logistics. But yeah, just the US alone, you're talking 50 million Americans that need this type of technology. So it's a huge market.
Mark, I want to follow up on that real quick, because this is a big step back discipline I find that is very helpful, especially when customer discovery has led an entrepreneur to say, nope, not here. This vertical doesn't need it. What kind of activities or exercises do you employ in that who might be a customer kind of question stream?
Yeah, I mean, one is if you're getting inbounds, you can kind of break it into verticals. And let me know if I'm answering this the wrong way. I'm thinking you're asking about how do you determine what those verticals are and which ones to focus on?
Who could be a customer exploration when I've been niched in over here and I might be blind to other opportunities that are totally ready?
Yeah, man. I mean, I think it's just talking to a lot of people. And if people get excited about your product, a lot of times they'll be like, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And I'm sure if you guys have done the mentor meetings at APQID, you've probably gotten a lot of that. You get kind of jerked around and different people have really strong opinions, and then it's up to the entrepreneur to figure out like which ones do I follow and which ones do I ignore. But a lot of the times I'll try to put it into a framework that makes sense for me. So for us, it was industry verticals. And so it's, hey, thanks for that idea on construction. I agree with you. I think it's a big market. I'm still doing my research into it. For now, we're focused over here. But I'll kind of put a pin in that to come back and try to get some data and make sure there's a good reason I'm in logistics and not in construction, and like double check my assumptions through that process. So like alcohol and beverage was another one that popped up we hadn't thought about until we had some very large alcohol and beverage groups start reaching out to us. And I was like, oh yeah, they're moving water. Water is really heavy. It makes sense.
Yeah. Beer. You want to get, all roads lead to beer ultimately, so that you can get some free product. No, I'm just kidding. Fantastic. All right. Other questions here. Dan, did you have any others that you've seen? And we are going to stop in a few minutes and do some closing activities, but really appreciate having Mark here.
Question from Ken.
Oh yeah, senior market. Is that one of the verticals that you've looked at?
We've seen that, but aren't interested right now. We don't want to go to direct to consumer just yet. I think there's a future product offering there. And this again comes back to the economic value. What we know is we've got 20 to 40% turnover in logistics. And every time they lose somebody and they have to replace them, it costs them about $6,000 to bring in somebody that earns about $12 an hour. So part of our pitch is if we can reduce fatigue, that person is going to stick around longer. They're less likely to leave because they're not as tired at the end of the day, because it's a super hard job. And so we're charging $1,200 per unit, which in the exoskeleton world is actually low cost, super low cost. But your average senior is not going to have $1,200 laying around to buy an exosuit. If and when we get a parallel technology kind of down to the $200, $250 mark, I think we could open up a direct consumer product that probably has a little less, doesn't need as much robustness because they're not lifting 10 hours a day straight. We can manufacture it cheaper, and there's probably a great opportunity there, but not initially. I want to go to people that could buy 1,000 or 10,000 units and focus on them and not focus on just one-off individuals right now.
Yeah, and Ken asked a follow-up question. Is this one of those roads where the health plan might ultimately be the customer in that senior market based on your genetics experience?
That pops up a lot. So the thing with the health plans is they want all the data first. So we are absolutely confident we reduce the amount of low back muscle firing while you're using this. So you're using your low back less, but we haven't proven that reduces injuries over time. It's very logical, and customers kind of get it, but that's going to be 18 months to 2 years to prove it out. And until you have that, you don't have the ROI data that a health plan or a workers' compensation plan could do to sort of underwrite rolling these out more broadly. But that's definitely an area we looked at.
That's part of that framework of decision making of not just is it a potential market, but when is it best to focus on that, or can I get paid to focus on that through like in this case an NIH, SBIR, or something like that might be the thing to use. But
yeah, it could be. And what I will say is these are all great questions, and like I went through the customer discovery process with those questions. So I mean, yesterday I was on the phone with the health plan, and you know, we go through this process and test it and question them and learn, like, yeah, at the end of the day, we're not going to do anything until you prove X, Y, and Z. And I say, oh, that's 2023. Okay, I'll slide that aside.
How much, Mark, day to day, how much time are you face to face with customers versus working on the team with product and things like that as the CEO?
Yeah, it changes a lot. Early on, I'm a big proponent of the CEO needs to be the main salesperson. I think that's really critical because this customer discovery process is so important. And you really need to learn how to sell yourself before you can train somebody to sell. So it varies day to day, but it's probably a good 25%, maybe 30% of my time is spent either selling or scheduling calls or prepping sales decks or whatever that may be. It may even be higher than that. It's probably between 30 and 50%.
Of your 150% time you're spending on.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, awesome. Dan put a link in that I right here, right? Go ahead and please click it. At least get it up in your browser, your array of browser tabs. But we hold it as a very high need for us to get surveys from you all, what's working, what's not working, especially. But even if you've come 5 times in a row to stay engaged, pop into that survey, please fill it out real quick. Give us some data that we can use to make informed decisions as we iterate this product. Let's see here, Dan, some folks joined late, so can you, before we close out with Mark, can you tell us what's next in the series and things like that one more time?
Great. Yeah. Thank you so much, everyone. Let's let's give a little clap, or you're allowed to unmute yourself, or you could do jazz hands, snaps, claps. It's up to you.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's absolutely wonderful to hear some of your journey. We do have one more activity before we go. So we hope that you hang on for a couple more minutes. Again, thank you so much for those that provide feedback, as we are a startup ourselves. And so for those that came in a little bit late, our next session is going to be with the Kickstart Seed Fund out of Seattle, or not Seattle, Salt Lake. I always get those confused for some reason. And it's going to be absolutely wonderful. They have hired a regional manager for New Mexico, so they're got an eyeball on investing in New Mexico. So if you're a New Mexican startup, you definitely want to be on that call. So that'll be next Friday. Again, the link is on our page in this session, as well as the transcript can be found at this link that I just shared. So give me a little bit of time to upload that and render the image or the video, but that will be up there by the end of the week. And so again, thank you so much for your time. Thank you so much for your applause and gratitude, and thank you for your participation, because I know we need more of this stuff in these times of quarantine. So TJ, I think we should wrap up with our standard kind of business requests and contact, and then we'll call it a day.
Call it a day, yeah. So what we want you to do is connect to the broader group here that's on the call with what you're doing and a need you have, whether that's access to somebody for customer discovery, which I hope it is, because you should always be doing this type of customer discovery. If you need to talk to people like X, Y, and Z, or you need to get to this type of person at, especially B2B, like Mark said, it was 9 months to get to the decision maker at United Healthcare. And so B2B customer delivery is really a game all of its own. But go ahead and put your put your ask in there in terms of what you need to propel your business forward. If you're needing customers, just say that. Give us a little picture of who your customer is. If you're looking for business partners, co-founders, put that in. What's your highest need? Think about it, type it up, put it in. I'm going to read these off as I get them. Oh yeah, and David King for our 5 companies in Activate New Mexico currently. He's going to talk financial projections, and he's got the monster of all monster spreadsheets. He's a magician in Excel. As he was talking to Mark, if he could just wake up, roll out of bed, and be in Excel, he's a happy guy, which makes me want to shoot myself in the head. But actually, I like data too. But really looking forward to that, David. Brian Steiner says, if anyone knows lawyers that are doing manual, repetitive work that we can automate, send them my way. So that's kind of the profile or the demographic of the law firm that Brian is looking at serving with his startup. Rick needs partners, co-founders to help run with an idea. It is a cool idea. I won't say anything more because Rick is not disclosed anymore in his little comment here, but I got wind of it last week. But if you're interested in an idea I think is pretty cool, you should talk to Rick. Chap, anyone knows people who own used gear stores? Always need customers, co-founders. Great for Rerouted. Lisa McGarry, welcome Lisa. Looking to build relationships with New Mexico business owners, is new to Albuquerque and new to the state. Bienvenidos a la tierra de encantamiento, or however you say enchantment in Spanish. Kanani, you build websites, looking for customers that need a fresh website. Fruitstand.tech, good stuff. Ken Gustafson, if you know any C-suite folks in healthcare, let me know. And on that note, I will be writing a little intro, Mark, you and Ken, based on what he's doing. He's in our Activate program. Love for you to kind of provide some pointers, if not some contacts. Usama, if you're good at applied stats or online media, know a lot about sports entertainment, let's talk. He's early in his venture, but really hunting down a pretty cool value proposition, I think. So reach out to Usama, or if you know somebody who's a sports enthusiast / entrepreneurial, make a little intro. Adam, family business with operations, inventory, or team, big plans or problems. Oh, so 2 statements. You want to maybe clarify that, Adam? You're looking for family businesses with operations, inventory, or team, big plans or problems. I wasn't quite sure what you're meaning there.
Yeah, I want to help people that are running into problems that are keeping them from doing what they love about their business, or if they have plans to like upgrade or change things, and they're wanting someone to help them make that happen. I'd love to consult with you.
Gotcha. Thank you, sir. Chap says talk to Usama is always fun. I condone that behavior as well. Carter, anyone who knows about shipping. Rerouted is dealing with that logistics side. So I don't know, Mark, if your shipping logistics contacts might be interested in this way, because that's, if I may expand on that, since also in the program, the mom and pops don't want to deal with shipping. And so there might be a partnership there to forge with them, so they can focus on the double-sided market and not have to get into the shipping game. Dan, you're talking. I'm not going to read what you say. Just kidding. All right, so fill out the survey. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for staying engaged. Thank you, Mark Harris, for spending your time with us. Hope you have a great weekend away. I'll be making a couple introductions for you, and staying engaged in the New Mexico community. And next time you're here, we'll hit the hills here. So, and then we'll have lunch at Flying Star.
That sounds amazing. Great. It was good to meet y'all.
Thanks, Mark.
Dan, do we have a mentor menu for today? Did I miss it?